Are you new to international education? If so, imagine if you could sit down with someone who could share the inside scoop on what to expect during recruiting and onboarding. A trusted guide who could give you helpful tips while also pointing out red flags to watch out for as you navigate your search. Imagine someone with years of experience working closely with both teacher candidates and the schools doing the hiring, who was ready to offer invaluable insights to help you succeed. Incredibly, we have found such a person. If you listened to our first interview with Diane Jacoutot of Edvectus, you will already have experienced her candid, forthcoming style and willingness to share her deep wisdom around the hiring process. In this show, Diane again leads us by the hand through what can be a bit of a minefield for folks new to this process, and truth be told, even for international teaching veterans. In this show, Diane addressed educators with limited teaching experience, all the way to veteran educators and what they can expect when recruiting internationally for the first time, red flags to be aware of during the recruiting process, the importance of timing when you apply to various levels of schools, what to expect with onboarding and orientation at your new school, and real-life examples highlighting the variety of experiences teachers face as they transition to their new schools. Check out our show notes for Diane's biography and resources mentioned in the interview. This show was recorded on September 9th, 2025. Definitely pause this recording and get your notebook out. David and I often talk about eyes wide open and do your research. Well, with Diane, that's exactly what's going on. You will not want to miss a word of this incredible show with this passionate and compassionate leader in the recruiting space.
Well, hello, Diane. Welcome back to the Educators Going Global podcast. And you have switched not only seats, but you've switched countries. Where in the world are you for this second episode?
Where in the world am I? I am in New Jersey.
Ah.
I was originally born and raised here before I moved to England. And I'm back visiting family.
Ah, most excellent. Are you going to get into the big city at all, or?
I will. Yeah, I've got family in the big city. And as anybody who's been abroad knows, when you come back home, you are run off your feet visiting relatives and family. And that is what I'll be doing for the next week and a half.
All right. Well, getting you out to see everyone before you get into fifth gear with all the recruiting coming up very soon. And again, that's going to be our theme that we're going to get into. But before we get to our guiding questions, and we've got several for you, do you have a going global story for us?
Yeah, I thought I would tell you a bit about two of my favorite schools that I visited. So in my role, I visit international schools. We go and vet them. We check in on people that we've placed. I can't say that we visit every school every year because that would literally be impossible. But I wanted to tell you about two of my favorite schools and why. So my first favorite school was a school that I visited in China. It's in Guangzhou, which is kind of near the south coast. It's not too far from Hong Kong. And this school is literally built in an amusement park. Yeah. So to go to the school, you have to, your taxi takes you through an amusement park, through the gates, and you go up a little hill, and there's this lovely school that has a roller coaster going through it. Now, the roller coaster isn't working, thankfully, because I could see that be a health and safety problem. But it is just such a lovely school. So it's a little bit older, but as you walk through the campus, you see the skeleton of a roller coaster. You see all different bits of this amusement park in the distance. And when I visit schools, I have a couple tells for what makes a good head teacher or principal. And one of them is they usually take me on a tour, and, we're walking through the school and they're pointing out different things, and they're usually ahead of me because, they know where they're going and I don't. And inevitably there'll be something out of place. There'll be a book bag on the floor. There'll be a scrap of paper. And one of my tells for a good school leader is, do they stop and pick it up? Or do they ignore it, or do they get someone else to do it? Right. So obviously the ones who stop and pick it up are the ones that I rate more highly. And indeed, this head did. So that I just love the school. The feel of it was fun. Learning was fun. It was a friendly, happy place. You walked into a classroom, and if you're in a less well-run school and you walk into a classroom, there's a little bit of a jump you get from the teachers. They kind of look at you and they're just a little bit afraid, or, what is going on? But when you walked into a classroom in this school, they were smiling, welcoming. They clearly loved the head as much as I seem to. So that was my first one. The second one couldn't be more different. It is a school in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah. And this school, as opposed to this other one, which was British, it was part of a fairly large group. This one was combining 3 curricula. So it was a school for Arab children. It was a school for Saudi kids. And they brought in a Swedish framework on top of the British and IB, and also embracing the bilingualism. And what was interesting about this school is a lot of times in the Middle East, at maybe lower tier schools, it's reflective of the local culture. The local culture is Muslim. And the Muslim way of teaching from ages back was maybe a bit didactic, a bit, kind of call and response. Whereas this school was trying to take inquiry-based education and overlay it with the culture and the Arabic and everything that's just absolutely fantastic about this part of the world. So you walked into that school and the children were smiling and happy, and the teachers were, so thrilled to be there. They work really hard because it's not easy to do what they're doing, but yeah, and those 2 schools couldn't have been more different. So that is my going global story, just about how there is no one right way of doing things.
Exactly. And there you're talking about the vibe of the schools and that trajectory of moving forward and getting people who are willing to try new things. I mean, to work, a cultural thing, if people go to amusement parks, I think in general in China, and Disney was about to make this mistake years ago, they didn't have enough green space. And that's one of the things when we would go from Hong Kong to Guangzhou to there's a couple of amusement parks were all the gardens. And that's a big eye opener. So thank you for sharing those Going Global stories.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, and I love the message that schools, there's no cookie cutter recipe for schools. It's each one is its own self. And when they blend in with the local culture, then you get the best of everything. And I do think also your point that the vibe that's set up is really, the tone is set by the head, and it really, really matters. The kids get a better experience, feel more comfortable, teachers feel more comfortable, parents feel more like it all kind of dominoes together. And that's lovely that there could be 2 such very different schools that are among your favorites for different reasons. Yes. I love it. So just to preface for our listeners, this is the second of 2 shows with Diane, and the first covered the state of international recruiting, and Diane also covers the services of the Edvectus recruiting agency, of which she is the founder and managing director. In this one, we are going to ask her to respond to the following 3 guiding questions. First of all, what can first-time international teachers expect during the recruitment process? And we're going to explore this in segments. First, focusing on young educators with limited teaching experience, then moving to mid-career teachers with solid experience, and then finally, seasoned veterans nearing retirement who are coming from their home country systems. The second question is, what are some common red flags that candidates should watch out for during the international school recruiting process? And thirdly, and this is one David and I have really wanted to ask for a long time, if a teacher finds themselves at a school that's poorly managed or different from what was initially portrayed during recruitment, what steps do you recommend they take to address the situation? So those are the overarching questions, and let's dive into the supporting questions. So let's first start with the first guiding question for aspiring international educators hoping to go global for the first time. What are some aspects of how the recruiting process functions and specific strategies that the 3 listed groups need to consider in constructing their recruiting plan? So let's start with the young and less experienced educators. What are the biggest tips you have for them?
Yep. So these are great questions, and thank you for asking them. So, for a younger and less experienced educator, I think you need to know, and I've talked about this last week, is it's a ladder. You are not going to leap to the top from the first rung. You need to take your time. You need to start at a school. In my head, I call them starter schools. They're schools that take good care of less experienced teachers, and then you work your way up. So just know that it will take time. I think sometimes teachers on their first trip abroad have this kind of preconceived notion that you're going to go abroad and be, the font of all knowledge because you're American or you're British, and, you're going to show them how it's done. And the fact is, you are an expert in, the British or American education system because you've come up through it and you've been trained in it, but you don't know how it's done abroad. You don't know the foreign culture. There's a lot you don't know. Every school is different in how it operates. And the level of difference in an international school is much wider than it will be in your home country. So I think you need to know that it's a ladder and that it will take time. So plan it that way. The best thing you can do for yourself is to research. Research the school and research the culture of the country that you're targeting if you're targeting a particular place. Really look at it, and not just the sensationalist stuff. It's maybe take a look at YouTube, some YouTube videos of people who have been there. Just try to get a real sense of it, because inevitably the culture of where you're going will be reflected in the school that you're teaching in. And when you're a younger, less experienced educator, those schools that are going to hire you will tend to be reflective of the local culture rather than of the expat culture. So I think of it as a spectrum. On one end, you have a school that might be American in name. They might use an American curriculum, but everything else about it is of the host national culture. On the other side is a school that is an expat school only for expat kids, only hires expat teachers, just happens to be in a foreign country. There's a lot fewer of those, and those ones will not tend to hire young, inexperienced teachers. So most likely you're going to get your start in a school that's much more reflective of the local culture. So just make sure that you understand it, that you're okay with it. That is probably my biggest two tips for less experienced educators.
So I'm going to start with my follow-up question because you get me thinking so much. And I did want to share the character strength of humility. You're working with those starter school administrators. How do you guide them in being transparent and saying, here's what we can do and here's what we can't do? Because they know, okay, I'm going to get Ahmed in here for maybe 2 years. I got to make sure he's going to want to stick around. Maybe he'll go for a third year. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, one of the founding principles that we talked about last week is people don't know what they don't know. And that applies to schools as well as educators. So when we work with some of these schools where the leadership team may be of that culture, of that foreign culture, they often don't know what a good foreign teacher really wants to see or how to support them. So at least in my company, we do try to seek out these schools that do a very good job. So for instance, there's a group of schools we work with in Kuwait, and Kuwait is normally not the top on anybody's list for, teaching abroad. It's a relatively small country. It's in the Middle East. Everybody wants to go to Dubai because they've heard about it, or Abu Dhabi because they've heard about it. So nobody really thinks about Kuwait. But there's this group of schools in Kuwait, American curriculum. They do the most fantastic job of supporting new teachers. They've got an in-house leadership academy. They know how to welcome young teachers. They give them, they have a buddy system. They do a lot of professional development. And so when we place young teachers in these schools, we know that they're going to have a great experience. So there are different kinds of schools. And that's not to say that a school that is hiring their first expat teacher wouldn't do a good job. They might. But I think it kind of just depends on the level of expertise. We do try to let schools know. We do ask them questions. We do try to give them leading questions so that they can better anticipate what a new teacher would need. But most of them, the amount of turnover in an international school, just so your listeners know, a typical international school will turn over 20% of their staff a year. 20% of their expat staff.
Yep.
That's typical. So hiring a new teacher is not going to be a surprise. they're, they're going to be used to that. So the decent ones will anticipate the needs of the new teachers and cater for them. They spend a lot of money getting these teachers over there. They have to pay for a visa, which is not cheap. They pay for your flights. They get your temporary housing. They sometimes pay for a full year of your permanent housing. They've invested a lot in you. And so a decent international school will not want you to fail. And so you just need to know that they're in it for you as well.
Well, that's good to know. And we talk a lot about in our shows for the candidates to have their list of questions. And so they should have questions if they've got the offer, and then they can ask some open-ended questions about what should I expect. And we're going to talk about orientation, onboarding in just a second. And if they get blank stares back, that's going to be a red flag. And we'll talk more about that. Okay, let's switch gears to either the single person or the couple in their 30s, leaning into their 40s. They've got a reasonable amount of experience. What might their experience be going through the process? Are they going to be able to jump up a couple steps on that ladder compared to the 23-year-old, for example, with 1 year experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good question. So when you have more experience, and I'm going to say 3 to 5 years is, the minimum of what we're looking at here, you will be able to access almost any international school, except for perhaps the very top tier. Kind of the world is your oyster when you're at that stage. So when you're a young teacher, you have 2 or fewer years of experience. The number of schools that can hire you, literally can hire you, some cannot, even if they wanted to, cannot hire you because they can't get you a visa. But when you've got 3 to 5 years experience as a minimum, then you're going to be able to access pretty much anywhere in the world. So my recommendation to you is to really think about what your goal is. And the most common 3 are money, because let's face it, the cost of living crisis around the world has really put a dent in everybody's savings plan. Is it career? Are you looking to stay international and you want to go up that ladder? Or is it location? Do you really need to be in a particular location for a particular reason? So I often say to people, you can pick any 2 on your first trip abroad, and you probably aren't going to get all 3 at your first time at bat. So prioritize them. Really think about it. I think the scariest teachers I work with are the ones who don't have any introspection at all, and just say, "Oh, I want to go to the top tier school in the top location, and they better hire me." You don't know your place in the market, and yes, you might be the most amazing teacher in the world in America, but you are unproven internationally, and you just need to know that. So again, going back, David, you said humility. I think you need to kind of have a bit of humility. You need to be confident in your teaching, but right now you are a newbie international teacher. So maybe think about those 3 things and prioritize them, and just have a real clear set of goals, because there's 15,000 international schools. So you're going to get analysis paralysis pretty quickly. So having that priority in your mind will allow you to sift and decide and weigh each one against the other.
Well, you really took me back there for a minute to when I was a young teacher, first time going overseas, and I had 2 years experience in Canada, and I was trying to parlay that into the school in Bermuda hiring me and saying, "Oh, but 2 is almost 3. Can you bend the rule?" And they just laughed and said, "No, hard and fast rule. We have no lack of applicants." So, but anyway, and I ended up in Ethiopia, and it was awesome. So, all good for me. So that's the, young, less experienced educators. And then the sort of 3 to 5 to 7 to 10, a little bit more experienced, but never been overseas. And now let's look at older educators who are kind of finishing up their home country career and looking for an overseas adventure. We're wondering if they might face any particular, like age-related, for example, work visa issues, or any other barriers to employment in an international school.
Yeah, this is such a great question. And let me preface it by saying that I'm going to be completely honest. I will tell you how it is. These are not my feelings. I am pushing 62. So it is not coming from me. But I think that educators need to know the lay of the land. So I just need to preface that before I get hate mail.
Yeah, please go for it.
Okay. So yes. So when a foreign country brings in a foreign educator, think of it from their perspective. They are hiring someone from abroad at great cost. And by doing so, they are putting a local person out of work, or not giving a local person who is their taxpayer, their citizen. They are not giving that person that opportunity in that international school. So what most countries do is set standards for, they set a bar that you have to be above or below to say, these are the kind of people that we're going to let you hire. So you need to get a visa. When you visit a foreign country as a tourist, yes, you can rock up and get a visa on arrival, but that's because you're a tourist and you're there to spend money. When you are a foreign teacher taking a job from a local, you need a work visa, and they are different. They are absolutely different. So with that said, many foreign countries have upper age limits for visas. I'll give you an example. Probably the lowest one I know of is in Brunei, which is a Southeast Asian country. There you need to be below 52 if you're a primary teacher, below 55 if you're a secondary teacher. When I say primary, to translate to the American, primary is elementary, secondary is a combination of middle and high. So these countries, I'll just name them: Indonesia, China, Hong Kong is 65, all through the Gulf, the Middle East. There are not necessarily hard rules on age, but what happens is you have to get a visa every year as opposed to every 2 years. And then your health insurance goes up astronomically. So whilst there's not a hard stop, there's a soft stop. So most schools there are not willing to consider older teachers because it costs them 4 times as much. So if you're an older teacher, and when I say older, I'm going to say 55 and above, you're going to face visa issues. Where I tell those teachers to look is Kuwait. Is kind of a fun one because their visa cutoff is actually 60. If you're in the country when you're 60, you can stay, as opposed to China or other countries where they might boot you out when you hit 60. So where I tell people to look is Europe. Doesn't tend to have age limits. Africa doesn't tend to have age limits, and Latin America doesn't tend to have age limits. So I would say focus your search there. The other thing that you're going to face are preconceived notions of older teachers. And this boils my blood, but it happens. A lot of people in the hiring, the HR people, tend to be local people. And they have these preconceived notions that older teachers might be tired, they might have less energy, they're not going to work as hard, they might be set in their ways. And so you're going to be battling against that bias, whether you know it or not. And so what I tell these teachers to do is make sure that your CV, your resume, reflects everything that you have contributed to the wider school community. Have you run after school clubs? Have you led professional development? Have you, what have you done that's going to fly in the face of this preconceived notion? Also, they're going to assume that you're going to be set in your ways. Well, talk about how you are always learning. Talk about the professional development that you've done, the self-study, the trips you've taken. Have you gone to foreign countries? Put that down. So you just need to kind of tip the scale a little bit more than a younger teacher might do. And so that's my advice for the teachers who are starting their career internationally. We get a lot of people like this who your children have flown the nest, right? And so you're saying, I had a teacher call me up and say, and I'd love to do my gap year. I just want to do it, when I'm 50. So that, I think, is what a lot of teachers do, but just know that it's not going to be quite as easy.
Well, I think you should send them a video of yourself doing cartwheels or something like that, Why not?
I've had older teachers go, look, I run marathons.
Yeah.
Right. So you just need to kind of demonstrate that these preconceived notions are incorrect.
So I would add to that, for us long timers, one of the truisms is we want to often end up our careers in places that we've kind of wanted to go for a long time, but we probably couldn't afford it. We wanted to earn more money earlier, let that compound. So it makes sense for Europe, parts of Africa, of course, Latin America. It makes a lot of sense. But I'm going to throw a curveball at you. I know a couple fellas in very sought after job positions who are getting close to 70 in their separate countries. And we were on the International Schools podcast with John and Dan talking about ageism. And I was going, here I am in Thailand, and if it's January and they lose a counselor, I just wonder how much kind of behind the scenes work schools can do to get visas or to bend the rules for those really sought after positions when something goes wrong. Someone doesn't show up and you need that AP math teacher, and there happens to be one who's 66. I just kind of throw that into the mix as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I try to explain it to people as there are hard rules and there are soft rules. So hard rules are those ones where you can never ever do it, right? You just can't. And then there's soft rules, which are, it depends. And being from New Jersey, I get the concept of soft rules. A lot of things are negotiable here in New Jersey. It depends on who you know. And so in a case like you were saying, David, it may be that a school could do one of two things. They could pull some strings. So a lot of these international schools might have educated people who are now in government, and they will go to their contact and say, hey, can you pull a couple of strings for me and get, this guy looks really good. I know he's above the age and, but could you do it for me as a favor? They're only going to do that a limited number of times. You need to be worth it, right? Because you have a limited number of strings to pull. So for a bog standard elementary teacher who's applying for a job in March, they're not going to do that. They're going to wait until they really need to do it. And so the other thing is preferences. They might have a preference for a teacher who's younger because of all these preconceived notions, but they will waive those preferences, because they're in a pinch. So I think it's that kind of hard and soft rule that applies both to the visa end of it as well as to the school preference end of it. So that's kind of my answer there. It's a matter of timing. Timing is everything.
Yep, as you were sharing last time, timing is everything. And I definitely get that. I think it makes a lot of sense. There are parts of the world we know they're rule followers. And then there are other parts where, hey, let's have some tea and let's figure this thing out, right?
Yeah, I would say the other way that schools bend the rule is they may not bring you in on the same kind of visa. And you do need to watch out for this, but it may not be a teacher visa. It might be a consultant visa, or it might be some other kind of visa. So you just have to watch that, because that's sometimes what they do, because those visas might not have the same age restrictions. So just, it can be okay, but sometimes it can also backfire if the school gets inspected and they say, hey, why is this PE teacher on a consultancy visa? That doesn't make any sense.
All right, well, let's now head down the pathway of red flags. As you've said previously, you don't know what you don't know, especially as a first timer. And you're going through the recruitment process. So what are, from kind of a big perspective, what are some red flags that first timers need to be aware of as they recruit?
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. You're absolutely right. And it's also very easy to confuse red flags with cultural differences. But let me give you my main ones that I look for. It's firstly, you need to look at how are they recruiting? How are they treating you during the recruitment process? Are they treating you in a transactional way? Did they miss the interview and reschedule it 3 times? Did they, do they ask you questions? Do they not smile? Do they not try to put you at ease? Are they kind of standing up on a pedestal and looking down on you? All of these things are going to be a flag that that school may treat their teachers in a transactional way rather than an asset to be cared for. Now, that's not to say that culturally there could be differences, because there are cultural things that might look a different way. But generally speaking, look at how they are interviewing you. Look at their safeguarding. So when you are interviewed, are they asking you safeguarding questions? Because having a strong safeguarding child protection policy is the mark of a good school. And are they asking you questions like, if you see a mark on a child, how do you handle it? Are they asking you those questions, or are they just going after you to see, the academics only? That to me is a flag if they don't care at all about safeguarding. What kind of paperwork are they asking you for? Are they asking you for the things that they would need to get a proper visa for you? Are they looking at your passport, the expiry on your passport? Are they looking at your degree? Is it relevant? What about your transcripts? Are they asking you for a criminal record check, an FBI check? A DBS check from the UK. Are they asking you for these things? Do you have them? Because they'll need those to get a proper visa. So those are things that I'd say are a red flag. Now, when you get a red flag, I think you can often get false red flags. And so when you do your research, you do need to maybe look at these schools and pick it apart a little bit. So let me give you some things to look for and to understand what makes a good school. Okay, what makes a decent landing place. And I'll start by explaining that it is a spectrum, but there are, generally speaking, 4 different kinds of international schools. And I'll start from the kind of lower end to go up to the upper end. On the kind of lower end, where you'll probably get more transactional treatment, is schools that teach English as a foreign language only. These are schools that exist just to teach a foreign language. You might teach after school, you might teach on weekends. They are not using the full curriculum, they are only teaching English. That is on the one end of the scale. Those are going to feel very, very local. Next, kind of up the ladder, are state schools that hire foreign teachers. So these are schools that offer compulsory education, but they might hire teachers to teach particular subjects, like English or like A-level chemistry or IB physics. They're going to be teaching in English, and they hire foreign teachers to do it. So there are state schools around the world that bring foreign teachers in. Not every country, but some. The next one is a private school that uses either local or international curriculum or combination of both, generally teaching host national kids, but they are fee-paying schools. And so they are kind of the next one up the food chain. And then the final one are schools for expat children using an expat curriculum, usually slightly modified because they have to fit in the foreign country, and expat teachers. So a British school for British kids and a British curriculum, but just happens to be in Malaysia. So those are the 4 kinds of schools. So know what kind of school you're applying for, because that will determine a lot of your experience in that school. So look at it and see if the school is part of an association. The better schools will be. Are they part of the British Schools Overseas? Are they part of Cognia? Are they part of Nord Anglia? Are they part of a big brand like Dwight? Are they IBO? Are they part of a group or association that will give them credibility, not just, I happen to open up a school in my backyard? Because there are those schools that are literally, I'm opening up a school in my backyard and I made a really good website. So look for inspection. There are some, really strong inspectors that go out there and inspect schools. So NIASC, there's a lot of American groups that will inspect schools, BSO, British Schools Overseas, Cognia, ECIS, are they accredited or inspected by a known group? That is often the mark of a good school. Next thing I'll tell you is to look at the leadership of the school, and that does not mean just the principal. Look at the senior leadership team and look at the board. Are they foreign or are they host nationals? And the more host national the leadership and the board are, the more that will be reflected in the culture of the school and the ethos of management. The management style will tend to be more local. Take a look at the website. And does the school have a page? They often have a page showing the vision of the school and a message from the head teacher or principal. Now, in a school that is having a little bit of trouble, what you'll notice is that message will be from a board member. It won't be from the principal or the head teacher. And the reason for that is that the head teacher turnover and the principal turnover is really fast, or that they don't get a voice. So take a look at the school website and see if there's a message from the head or the principal, and look at how long that person's been there. You can go to some of these school reviews websites and see how long that person's been at post. Take a look at the head's LinkedIn. How long have they been there? If they've only been there for a year, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you don't really know how much impact they're going to have in the future. So take a look at that. I think that's probably the main thing. Some of the questions that you're going to want to ask on your first time is, what are the nationalities of the teachers in your school? What are the percentages? Because if it's an American school, that one that I was talking to you about in Kuwait, they will maybe have 20-25% American Canadian teachers, some percentage of Australian, New Zealand, British, Irish, and some percentage of host nationals. So they're going to have a mix. But for your experience, I'd say look for something maybe no less than 20% Western nationalities. You can ask the turnover of their expatriate staff, meaning how many leave. And as I said, 20% is pretty typical. So if you see 20-30% for a starter school, that's okay. If they're saying it's 50% of teachers only last maybe 1 or 2 years, then that's a real danger sign. And then if you're still having doubts, one thing you can do if you're getting an offer is to say, could I talk to a teacher who's working at your school, who's, my age and nationality? Can I talk to them offline? Because most teachers won't lie bald-faced to another teacher. They won't. They'll be tactful, but they'll tell you like it is if you ask them a question. So ask to talk to a teacher, not just a head teacher, but a teacher who's of your age and nationality offline. And you can do this when you're at that kind of offer stage. You don't necessarily need to do it at the interview stage, but do it at the offer stage. If you know they want you, that's your final kicking the tires. Another thing that is usually needed for a visa is a criminal background check. And these are federal level checks. They're not state level checks. They're not name checks. A good international school will want to have a proper background check. So in the US, this will be an FBI check. In the UK, it'll be a DBS check or what's called an ICPC, an International Child Protection Certificate. In every country where you're coming from, it will be called a different thing. A good international school will also possibly ask you, if you've lived in different countries recently, they might ask you for a criminal check of that country. So if this is your second trip abroad or third trip abroad, if you lived in a foreign country, you'll want to get a criminal check from that country before you leave. So because of the child protection protocols, and as I said, a good school will care about this, you will need to get a criminal check, and that can take a while. So, for some of our teachers, a South African teacher, for instance, this could take forever. So as you start your journey, you're thinking about international teaching, you might want to apply for that. It often can be no older than 6 months before you want to start your job, and in some cases 3 months before you want to start your job, so that you can be up against that. Take a look at what the rules are for the country that you're targeting or the countries that you're targeting. But if you can apply for it earlier so that it's there 3 to 6 months before you're going, it's a really good shout to do that. And that's something that you'll have to pay for. Oftentimes international schools won't. It's part of you proving that you have the qualifications and experience to do it. Now, if there is something on your criminal record check, and oftentimes, there can be, you should declare that to the school at interview. So if you, one of the kind of funniest ones was we had a teacher who, when she was 17 years old, she was arrested for stealing a shopping cart and kind of joyriding on the shopping cart.
Oh my goodness.
And that, quite harmless, but it was on her criminal record. And whilst you might not want to think that that will impact on their school decision, it could impact on the visa. And that's not up to the school, that's up to the country. So if you do have something that's going to show on your FBI check, you need to declare it at interview so that they can tell you whether or not it's going to be a problem. Because the last thing you want is for you to fall at that last hurdle. You've made that choice, the school have hired you. You then show up, 3 months before you're about to leave with this criminal record check that shows joyriding on a shopping cart, and they can't get you in. So now you're back to the start. The things that will absolutely cause trouble, the 2 or 3 things that will cause trouble are anything to do with drugs. A lot of countries have very strict rules about that. You cannot get in if you've got a drug conviction. Anything to do with child protection, obviously. Anything to do with violence, domestic violence, violence against other people, aggravated assault, those kind of things. And they can look at arrest as well as conviction. So those are the kind of flaggy ones that could cause a problem in some countries. So definitely declare those if you've got them.
So would you go so far as to say that if a school doesn't ask you for a background check in this day and age, that would be a red flag?
Absolutely. Yeah, they might not. They might ask you a question like, "Do you have anything on your criminal record check? Is anything going to show?" Because they're kind of pre-qualifying you for a visa. It might come up after the offer stage or during the offer stage. They'll give you a list of documents you need to provide. They might not ask you all this in the beginning, but if they decide you're the one for them, they're going to say, these are the documents we need, and this is the format that we need them in. If they don't ask you for a criminal record check, I would absolutely not consider that school. Because who are you teaching next to? What kind of people are they hiring if they don't care about child protection?
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
And I'll add, from going on Reddit, like in the spring, in the last couple of years, seeing people posting to say, I haven't heard from my school. Aren't they supposed to contact me? So another red flag. If you're not hearing from them, asking for you to move forward with this paperwork process. So keep that in mind. So that is a picture that you're painting for us. And I want to differentiate, maybe that's a group that's almost not on the low end. They're so low. For example, I was talking to a fellow the other day who had a friend who was an oil worker here in Bangkok, and he switched to teaching English. And I was explaining to him the difference between the after school English and then international schools. And he goes, well, he's at an international school now. I go, well, how did he make that leap? Does he have a teaching degree? No. Does he have a university degree? No. What's he teaching? 4th grade. And I said, oh my goodness. So to me, that kind of almost the old stories of the backpackers getting hired in August, that's a whole different gambit, right? Those are folks that are just scrambling to hire people. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Are they hiring you just because you have the right look to make the parents happy? I will say that there are some schools like that one in Kuwait. They'll take an unlicensed teacher who's got experience, because sometimes you get that. If you're in a private school in the US, you can teach and you don't have a license. And they will put you through a licensing program so that you come out with a license. Some schools will do that. But by and large, these kind of more dodgy schools, they might just be hiring somebody because they speak English as their first language and that's really their only job. Now, if you're an oil worker, then maybe that's not a bad choice for you, because you don't want to be put into a really high profile international school, because they're going to expect you to know what you're doing. In this case where you're talking about with this oil worker, they're going to tell him what to do every day. And that's probably okay for him. He's probably going to make decent money doing that. But is that a good career move if you're an international teacher and you want to move up the food chain, up that ladder? No, because there's no place for you to go. Nobody's going to want to hire you knowing that you've had that kind of experience, except another school of that ilk. And another thing to watch out for that you had asked me about previously was fake offers. So usually around June, July, August, because 90% of international schools have an August, September start. Right around that end, you'll find every now and then that there'll be these fake schools that pop up, often in the Middle East. They'll be in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, places where people want to go desperately. And they will look like a school. They'll have a website, and you'll get an offer sometimes without even interviewing. An offer will land in your inbox.
Wow.
Especially if you've registered on some of these sites where you can load your CV up, so you can load your CV up and people can find you. You'll get these offers that come in the mail, or there might be an interview, but it'll be, 2 questions. And then what will happen is they'll ask you for your documentation and they'll ask you for money. And they'll say, oh, we need this money to process your visa and get your flight. And we'll pay you back when you arrive. So these are fake schools. An international school will not ever ask you for money. There is money that you might need to pay to get your own documents verified and attested. You pay that to the government of your home country that issued these documents. You never, ever give money to a foreign country to process your visa. That just should never happen. So that's where you draw the line. If they ever ask you for money, walk away.
So I'm sort of catching a little irony here, because last episode where we chatted with you, you talked about fake teachers. And I really think it'd be funny if the fake schools hired the fake teachers.
They deserve each other. Yes. Yeah. You know what? It's a big world out there, and there are people that are going to take advantage where they can. So it's just really sad because I see these teachers, I've seen them apply to us and we're like, we just can't help you. You don't have the right qualifications. You don't have the right experience. I'm really sorry. These are the ones that are ripe to be exploited by these fake offers and
Right.
fake schools. So it's quite sad. And usually, in July, I'll send out in my newsletter. I've got it on my blog. Here are the things to look out for, for a scam. But as soon as I ask you for money, walk away.
Right. Well, that sounds like another blog post, maybe, if you're willing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. All right. So let's imagine that our first timers land a job. Woohoo! And they're preparing to transition to their new school. So let's look at some fundamental experiences they should have in light of the previous question about red flags. So, first of all, what are some basic onboarding activities they should experience before they board the plane to their new school?
Yeah. Okay. So, as I mentioned, to work in a foreign country, you need a visa. And to get a visa, you need to have proven that you have the qualifications and experience to get that visa. So, at a minimum, what they're going to need from you is a passport. And I would say no less than 12 months left on it. So, look at the expiry date of your passport. And if it's going to expire within 12 months, just get it renewed now before you start applying. Because once you get there, that visa will be stamped in your passport and you don't want to have to pay for that whole thing again. The school doesn't want to have to pay for that whole thing again. So make sure that you've got more than 12 months left on your passport. And if you don't have a passport, get one. Next thing they're going to need are your degrees, your bachelor's degree, your master's degree, often your teaching license. If you are in the UK, your PGCE. If you're in the US, your teaching license. Those degrees and certificates. Imagine you are the Ministry of Education guy in Bahrain, and you are looking at qualifications and experience from teachers from all over the world, from Malawi, from Thailand, teachers from Zimbabwe, from all over the place. You don't know what a relevant degree looks like or a relevant license looks like. They could have printed it off the internet and you would not know. So, what you have to do to make that guy's life easier and to make it relevant is you go to the country that issued that document. So, if you're American, you take your degree, and that degree there's many different ways to call it, but attested apostilled. What it means is your state government looks at it. Your state and federal government look at it and they say, yes, this is a valid degree. We recognize this university exists. This is what a degree from that university looks like. We put a stamp on it saying our country recognizes this. Then that guy in Bahrain only has to know what the stamp looks like from that country. And you'll then take it to the Bahraini embassy. The Bahraini embassy in your country looks at it and they say, yep, this is what the stamp from this country looks like. We know that that's what it looks like. So this thing is authentic. So there are many different words for it: attested, apostilled, authenticated. It is different than notarized. Notarized can be a step in that process, but it is not the process. Notarized just means that a legal person with a stamp looks at it and says, this is, I've seen the original. That's what it says. But it doesn't say that original is authentic. They've only seen the original.
Good distinction.
Yeah. So there is a distinction. So, poor American teachers, they actually have to go through 4 stages. They might have to get it notarized. Then they have to get the state to stamp it. Then they have to get the federal government to stamp it. And then they've got to get the foreign embassy in that country to stamp it. So it can take a while. And every school and every country will have a different list of things you need. At a minimum, it should be your degree and your teacher training, but it could also be your transcripts. If you're married, it can be your marriage certificate. If you have children coming with, it can be their birth certificates. Your school will tell you what you need. So that's at a minimum, and that's just to get in the door. As you get closer to the date, if the school is providing flights, which they usually will, they will, ask you where you want to fly from. They'll find out if they're going to be providing housing. They might send you pictures of the housing. They might help you find it before arrival or tell you where you're going to land. So that's kind of the stuff that you'll experience. I will say the other thing you will experience is buyer's remorse. So it's not an onboarding activity, but it's something you're going to go through. What happens to almost every teacher is as you get closer to the date, you get afraid. You start imagining all the horrible things that can go wrong. Whereas when you're chasing that job, you have these rose-colored glasses and you have it in your head that this is the most amazing job you're ever going to have. And it's going to be, your favorite job on a stick. Nothing will go wrong and everything will be amazing and sunny and you'll be romping through fields of daisies. Then when you get closer, you start going, oh no, I just noticed that there's an earthquake in the country next door. I could be in an earthquake.
Right.
Or what if I don't have good housing? Or what if I hate my job? Or what if my mother has a health issue? You start going through all of these horrible things. And what I tell teachers is the truth will always be somewhere in between. It will not be as bad as you imagine. It will not be romping through a field of daisies.
Right.
It'll be somewhere in the middle. So just know that that's something that you're going to feel and anticipate it.
Very sage advice. Thank you.
All right, so you've landed in your new country and you're ready to roll. What should be, again, some basic things that happen? You've arrived at the airport. Might someone be there? And then kind of roll into orientation.
Yep. Okay, so a good school, almost every school I know of, will meet you at the airport. They'll have somebody meet you at the airport with a sign. So you're not going to be wandering around. You do have to get through immigration. So you're going to have your visa paperwork. They're going to look at it. They'll stamp it. It might take a little longer than if you were a tourist. So just anticipate that, but they anticipate that. So there'll be somebody waiting for you at the airport. Now, it depends on the package that you have from your school. If the school is providing housing, they will take you straight to the housing that is provided. But if you don't have housing provided, if you're getting an allowance, or if your allowance is lumped in with your salary, then they'll take you to temporary housing. Maybe a hotel, might be like a little apartment, one of those kind of hotel apartments. It could be something like that. But they'll take you there. A good school will have milk in the fridge. They'll kind of anticipate your needs, but you might not. So just bring with you what you might need for your first morning. If you're a coffee drinker like I am, you need that first cup of coffee. Just, maybe put a coffee bag or something in your suitcase so that you're ready. So then you get set up. Then they will give you an agenda. This is what will happen. And what the school want to do is to get you settled as quickly as possible. So when you're moving to a foreign country, your orientation is not going to just be about the curriculum and the school rules. It's going to be getting you a bank account so that they can pay you. It's going to be getting your residency sorted. So we talked about a visa, which is the first step in getting into the country legally. But most countries will then have a residency stamp on your passport, which means you've now got to maybe get a medical. They have to make sure you don't have communicable diseases, that you are who you say you are. And so oftentimes your passport is going to be taken away so they can put a residency stamp in it. So that whole thing is going to happen, and the school will take you through that. They're going to take you to get your medical. They're going to take you to get whatever you need to get for your residency. They're going to help you get a bank account, all the paperwork that you need, everything that you need to get sorted. Sometimes they'll help you get a car if you're going to need a car. They'll introduce you to car leasing companies and whatnot. So that's the non-curriculum side. You'll then have a curriculum side of the orientation. And that will be kind of you and all the other new teachers, that other 20% turnover. You'll all be together, which is great. And they'll tell you about the curriculum, about the school rules. They'll give you a cultural orientation, which is so important. What can you not say? What do you need to avoid doing? Because every country has their culture and you need to respect it. As I tell people, the school and the country are the hand and you're the glove. You have to fit within their culture. They've been there a lot longer than you have. You need to respect it. Yes, you bring a lot to the table educationally and culturally, but you're not going to change their culture. You're not there to do that. So that cultural orientation is oh so important. So they're going to give you that cultural activity. And one of the best things you can do in part A, onboarding, is to do your research and come there informed. But don't think you're going to come there to change the world, because you're not. So that's what happens during orientation. It's more than just here's the school rules if somebody misbehaves. It's so much more than that.
Wow, we're really getting some great information here. Thank you so much for all of this.
My
Now,
pleasure.
the next question is we're wondering what suggestions you might have, and this is such a big, juicy one, that you might have if someone does, despite looking out for red flags and being really careful with their research, end up at a school that isn't managed well, or maybe things aren't quite as they were represented during the interviews. How do you suggest they handle that?
Yeah. Okay. So again, it's a spectrum. I will start by saying that there will be things that go wrong. There will be things that happen that you will not expect. You are dealing with a different culture and a different country. So all of your experiences in your home country are setting you up to do this, but they're not setting you up to understand that it is going to be a different culture. Culture is such an insidious thing. It's the air that you breathe, it's the expectations that you have of how you'll be treated when you do a certain thing, what the reactions, what the facial expressions are going to be when you crack a joke. Culture is so pervasive. So there are going to be things that you don't expect and places that you're going to trip up. Expect that. But there is a spectrum. There are going to be things that go wrong, which are truly red flags. So I'm going to give you some examples. I think that's the best way to do it. Give you some real life examples. There was a school that I dealt with in Dubai, a really good IB school, always had the best interests of the candidates at heart. And they provide housing as part of their package. So this was back when housing was really hard to get in Dubai. There was a real shortage. And so they wanted to get this nice housing, and their housing stock turns over every year. Some of the leases come up and they have to get new ones. So they got this housing in this area of Dubai called Bur Dubai. And what they didn't realize is that that housing was in the red light district of Dubai. Now, they didn't know this because they visited it during the day, and they were obviously not people who frequented the red light district of Dubai. So these poor teachers show up and they're shown to their housing during the day, and they go there and they realize that it's the red light district. And they're like, what the heck just happened? What is this school? So what I tell people is look at not when problems happen, look at how the problems are handled. And so what the school did is they put the people in housing. They didn't leave them in the red light district. Well, I mean, they asked them, do you want to stay? And actually some of the single men were like, I'm fine with this. But, they didn't care. They weren't intimidated, because they were actually really nice apartments. So how does the school handle it? How do they handle the problems when they arise? Do they brush it under the carpet? Do they ignore you? Or do they react? Right. So again, the problems are a spectrum. Another example is one that happened just this year. We placed teachers in a school in Saudi Arabia, and the school had problems in the previous years with housing. So they went and contracted for some brand new housing, brand new, just built. Well, as happens often in the Middle East, things were late. And the housing wasn't quite ready on time. It was almost ready on time. So they moved the teachers into the housing, and the housing was dirty, as a building site can be. They got somebody in to clean it, but it wasn't the best cleaning job. There were maybe some exposed wires out that were going to be fixed, but they wanted to get the teachers in this housing because, it was nicer than a hotel in their estimation. And the teachers weren't happy. They just got off the plane and they go to this dirty apartment. And so on the spectrum of things, in my mind, this is quite minor. This is something that can be fixed. It's one of those stumbling blocks. It's not, you shouldn't be fleeing a school because you get to a dirty apartment. You're going to find mold. If you're in the Middle East, if you're in Asia, you're going to find mold in a corner because these apartments have sat empty, for the summer. So there are going to be things like that, which are minor that can be addressed, and you should be addressing them with HR. You should put them in a spectrum. Not every problem that you see is going to be an earth-shaking problem. They're going to have bigger problems on their list. They've got, 100 new teachers coming in, and they're dealing with the biggest problems first. So, they're moving the people out of the red light district rather than worrying about getting you a cleaner. So they've got to prioritize. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, things where I draw a red line is, did they change the contract after arrival?
Right.
So in some countries, a contract is not valid until it's signed in that country. So there are going to be times where you get a draft contract and you might sign it, but you might have to re-sign it when you get there. And that's just because of the laws of that place. The contract may have to be in the language of the country. So in the Middle East, for instance, it may need to be in Arabic, but then there'll be an English translation. If it's one of those countries where it's not legal until it's signed, you can ask for a draft contract and get someone to translate it for you, just to make sure the translation is accurate. Because what'll happen in those countries is it's the language of the country that is the legal one. The translation is for your benefit. And this is true in so many countries, from Spain to the UAE to China. It is the language of their country, therefore that's the legal language of their country. So you can get a draft contract beforehand, but it might not be legal until you sign it in country. Now, if that contract changes when you get there, or if they ask you to sign a new contract that is completely different, that is a blazing red flag. What they're doing is taking advantage of you, that you've now arrived in that country and they're pulling the rug out from under you and hoping that you sign up to something that might be less. That's where we draw the line. So if we place anybody in a school like that, we will absolutely not have a worry in the world about moving them out, because that's not okay. We will let the school know that that's not okay, and then we will not work with that school again. So when it comes to something like that, where you're actually taking advantage of people rather than just trying to prioritize, that's not okay. So if you find yourself in a situation, which is not the complete end of the spectrum where they're changing the contract, they're unscrupulous, but if there are things that seem to be going wrong, if it's not what you expected, if you're maybe teaching a year group that you weren't really prepared for, if things, the road is a little rocky, I always tell people to please try and see out the school year. It's not great for the school. It's not actually great for your resume. It's not great for the kids for you to kind of bolt at the first hurdle. An international school will look at you, and if you've left during the school year, you're going to be answering that question forever at your interviews. Why did you leave? And it's a reflection of your resiliency. When I interview teachers and I ask that question about, why did you leave midway through the year? Or why did the school terminate you midway through the year? Or what made you go? It's a question that's going to keep coming up, and you're going to have to justify yourself each and every time. So if you can avoid it and see through the school year, you will come out a better person in so many ways. You just want to get a decent reference from that school. And if you fled in the middle of the night, or if you left when you shouldn't have, you're never going to get a decent reference. The other thing that you need to know is that the way you leave is important. Fleeing in the middle of the night, whilst I understand that you might have lost trust in the school and you might be feeling threatened because you're in a foreign country and your mind just whirs, if you leave behind any debt, a school can put a block on you so that you won't even be able to transition through that airport ever again. So we've had teachers who have done this in the UAE, for instance. There's a lot of international schools in the UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. They've left debt, and the schools put a block on them. And we've had people who were transitioning to a new job, or even transiting through the airport to go somewhere else. And they were pulled over and made to repay that debt before they could leave the airport. So just know that how you leave, you have to leave in a good way. Even though it might hurt you to do so, you need to leave in a good way. And so that's my advice for teachers when things go wrong. Just try to put it in perspective. Know that things will go wrong. Try to put it in a spectrum of, is this earth-shattering? Is this really going to make a big difference to me in 9 months' time? And if not, I'm just going to try to see it out and make a better choice next time, because you will get some good experience in that school. You'll still work next to some really great teachers and learn some new skills. See the school year out, because then you'll see the full cycle.
Thank you for that wise advice, clearly from a lot of experience. So let's shift into our last question, which is very connected. We've got a theme going here when things aren't working out, and also using your term spectrum. So during August and now in September, I've been on the forums. I'm seeing people jump on and say, oh, there's a job opening at XYZ or ABC. Should I take it? I'm just starting to think about becoming an international educator. And lots of good folks are on there offering advice. And I suspect there's some schools where out of the blue, someone got sick and they didn't show up, and it's legitimate. Or it's one of these schools that's in somebody's backyard, and definitely people aren't showing up. So what is your take on very late openings and applying for them?
Yeah. We do a lot of business in late openings. I actually quite like them because it allows teachers to kind of punch one rung above their weight. Oftentimes, you're not going to punch three rungs above your weight, but you can often get considered by a better school that wouldn't have considered you in January or March, but they will consider you in July and August. So you can actually, jump one rung up. Yes, but then there are some schools where the teacher has shown up and realized it's a backyard school and gone, not for me, I'm leaving. But also there's schools where they've just increased enrollment. Culturally, in some parts of the world, in the Middle East, for example, it's just a very last minute culture. And schools oftentimes will rock up in August, dust off their school and realize that they've got another class to fill because they've had all these last minute applications because it's just a last minute culture. So they might have to open up a new class because they've had extra enrollment. So there are those ones. So I think it's the same advice actually applies when I talked about new teachers looking at a school, taking a look at who the school is. Are they accredited? Are they part of a group of schools? Are they part of an association? How is their interview process? Because a good school will run through the same interview process as if you're applying in January or if you're applying in August. It'll just go a lot faster in August. So yeah, it is really the same advice. When you're looking, if you're going to take advantage of this kind of punching one rung above your weight, just maybe know that these jobs are often scattered around the world. So if you wanted to get those three things, career, location, and salary, you're going to have a lot less chance of getting all three of those because we can't predict where those jobs are going to be. And so if you want two of those three, you have less choice because there's fewer of these jobs around. But if you're flexible on location, we can often get you a much better school within the bounds of the visa. Now, I do hasten to add that even a very good international school may choose to bring you in on a tourist visa initially. And that is just because they need that class filled. And so they may bring you in on a tourist visa and process your visa in country while you're there. There are some countries where you can't do that and some countries where you can. So if you're in one of these situations and they're bringing you in on a tourist visa, you do want to ask the question, when will my visa be processed? How quickly can that be done once I arrive? Just make sure that they're going to get you a permanent visa and not going to keep you on a tourist visa because that's not okay. Now, mid-year openings in January are really the same thing. There are a number of schools, we've got some right now on our books, who maybe have had extra enrollment or are anticipating just tipping over the edge in January. And they're opening up January jobs now because they want to give themselves extra time to recruit. So if they can wait till January, they will. And they're going to, again, want the best teachers for that. They're going to be more picky because they can be because they've got better lead time. Or they know that their visas take longer and they can't bring you in on a tourist visa. They're going to be starting now for a January start. There's just fewer of those because most schools, 90% of the time, they're a September start, and 90% of that time, they're organized and sorted and they know what they're doing.
Well, this has just been such a wealth of information, and it's incredible to be able to speak to somebody who's so knowledgeable, experienced, and also forthcoming. So we really appreciate that. I don't know if it's even possible, but is there anything else you might like to share as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I think what I'd like to leave the listeners with is, we've talked about a lot of the problems and a lot of the things you shouldn't do. But if you are a resilient person and a culturally open person, teaching abroad is such a gift. Living in a foreign country, all the things that can go right. You are going to be working in a school with people who are just like you, who they might be from Australia, New Zealand, or Lebanon, but they are also seekers. They're also open-minded. They're also open to new ideas and experiences. And so you're going to be teaching with some of the most fantastic people you could ever meet from all over the world. You're going to be learning about how they teach early years in New Zealand, or some tricks that you might not have even thought of or never come across if you're just teaching in the US. So you'll leave this experience not just with more money, but I think as a richer, more open-minded person who is a better teacher. And when you choose to go back home, it will make your home experience that much different. I mean, some people choose never to go back home. They choose, like we are global nomads. But if you do choose to go back home, I think you're going to be a better person for it if you are the kind of person who has that resiliency and that open-mindedness and that curiosity about the world.
Oh, couldn't have said it better myself. That's beautiful. And that's, we've talked to a lot of people, and that's kind of our main message too, is be smart, do your research, know what you're getting into. And it's one of the most amazing, as we say, best kept secrets in education to steal from the ITP. Although they weren't the first ones to say it, I'm sure. But thanks again.
Yep, very welcome.
And I'll add to our listeners, we have 90 some other episodes that are much more rosy and wonderful and all that. We needed to have this episode.
Right.
We really did. And we hope it's a great service to everyone. But back to our first timers, that you've really gotten the scoop on this show. And we used to use the term eyes wide open earlier when we started. We used that a lot, didn't we, Audrey?
Yeah.
And this show is about eyes wide open. So thank you so much. And for our listeners in our show notes, we'll have the contact information for Diane and Edvectus website and a little bit more information again. So thank you so much. You're jet lagging and you are triple clear than I am on a good day.
I had some really good coffee this morning.
Awesome. So, all right. Well, you were on quite a journey getting revved up for the recruiting season. And I know your clients from the schools to the educators are in such great hands with you and your team, Diane. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
and David,
inviting you to travel,
teach,
and connect with us.